Say you get a surf shack on Airbnb. Now you can also
everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's really great to see the turnout. So we all really appreciate everyone coming to support. We have a really great program planned for you today. And the first thing I want to do is introduce Dr. Goldberg. So it is now my pleasure to welcome Dean Amy J. Goldberg. Dr. Goldberg was named Dean of the Lewis Katz School of Medicine in September 2022. She is Temple-made through and through. After matching to her general surgery residency program at Temple more than 30 years ago, Dr. Goldberg has built her celebrated and nationally renowned career right here. She's an exceptional surgeon, an acclaimed thought leader and advocate, and a superb educator. And now she is helping to author the next chapter for the school with her inspiring vision and passion. Please welcome Dr. Goldberg.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. What really a great evening, and it's so wonderful to see everybody here. So thank you, Hema. Appreciate the introduction. I'm still embarrassed by it all. But today is a special day as we gather to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on his birthday. A moment to reflect not only on his extraordinary legacy, but on the responsibility that we each carry to advance it. Dr. King's birthday has always been a day grounded in learning, service, and action. In that spirit, Katz brings our community together, not only today, but throughout the month of January. It's not just one day, and in fact, it's not even 1 month, right, Melanie? It's every day. But we're going to be throughout the whole month of January in meaningful ways, through service to our neighbors, thoughtful dialogue, and opportunities to deepen our understanding of justice, equity, and health. Today's event embodies that commitment. We are honored, really honored to welcome award-winning journalist and Klein College of Media and Communication Journalism professor Linn Washington Jr., whose keynote explores the power of storytelling in movements for justice. Drawing on decades of reporting on civil rights, race-based disparities, and community resilience, Professor Washington reminds us that narratives matter, that the stories we tell shape understanding, influence action, and move societies towards change. His work challenges us to consider how we use our voices to advance Dr. King's legacy today. Throughout this month, our students and faculty and staff will engage in acts of service and reflection, collecting and delivering essential items to those in need, participating in educational programs, and creating spaces like this one for dialogue and learning. These efforts reflect our belief that service and scholarship are inseparable from our mission. While today is a powerful day of remembrance, reflection, and action, we also know that living Dr. King's legacy requires more than a single day. In his final essay, A Testament of Hope, Dr. King reminds us that perseverance and hope are forces for transformation, especially in the face of injustice, a message that continues to guide us. As we move through 2026, Martin Luther King Day and this month set the tone for reaffirming our shared values and the mission and vision of the Lewis Katz School of Medicine. And I would remind all of us, what is our mission? Our mission is to align with our diverse communities to advance medicine and improve health through education, research, training, and the development of the next generation of clinicians, educators, and scientists. And our vision is to inspire a new standard of excellence in education and research and to lead social change in medicine. Now, people that are faculty and staff in the school know that we start all of our meetings with this mission and vision. As students, you may not know that, but we remind ourselves every day that we work here what it is that we do and what that mission and vision is. And the words are so powerful. But what's so great here at CATS is they're not just words. They are actions, they are values, and they are in our hearts. And that's really what makes CATS so special, and this day and month and every day very special. Martin Luther King Day challenges us to ask whether we are truly living these values. We are. Whether our work advances equity, justice, and service in meaningful and measurable ways. And as I said, at CATS, this means creating an environment where education and research are not only excellent, but purposeful. It means centering equity and inclusion in our classrooms, our research, and our community partnerships. And it means ensuring that every member of our community has the opportunity to learn, contribute, and thrive. As we honor Dr. King on his birthday and reflect on his enduring legacy, let us recommit ourselves to carrying his vision forward through our work, our words, our actions, and knowing that each effort contributes to a more just, equitable, and hopeful future. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the Student Government Association Community Service Board members for their leadership and dedication in coordinating the many MLK Month activities taking place this year. So you see all the emails that are coming out. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for putting such a great program together. Again, not just today and not just this week, but what we do. So thank you. Their commitment to service and engagement has helped bring Dr. King's values to life across our community. It is because of efforts like theirs that Dr. King's legacy continues, not just in words, but in actions. So thank you so much. Linn Washington, we can't wait, Professor Washington, to hear you. So thank you so much. All right. Take it away. Oh, you're good. All right.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goldberg. So now I'd like to introduce Madison, who will be providing historical context for a musical piece that we've chosen to play, Lift Every Voice and Sing. Please welcome Madison.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Like Hema said, I'm Madison Jennings, a first-year PA student here at Lewis Katz. So I'll be sharing a bit of history regarding the origin of Lift Every Voice and Sing, as offered by Emmett G. Price III, the inaugural Dean of Africana Studies at Berklee College of Music and Boston Conservatory at Berklee. So, now known as the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing was penned in 1900 as a hymn of hope, grounded in belief that resilient faith would sustain Black people against oppression. James Weldon Johnson, the songwriter, was born in Jacksonville in 1871 to a Haitian mother from the Bahamas and a father from Richmond. Like many other Black Americans at the time, James Weldon Johnson was influenced by the message of educator, orator, and public intellectual Booker T. Washington. Born into slavery in 1856, Washington advocated for Black liberation through economic and educational achievement. Serving for decades as the first leader of the Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute, now known as Tuskegee University, Washington was a devout Christian who believed that God was powerful enough to liberate Black people from the evil of racism. Washington's focus on education and emphasis on hope and resilience inspired Johnson. After attending Atlanta University, which is now Clark Atlanta University, Johnson returned home to serve as a principal of his middle school alma mater. For a celebration of Abraham Lincoln's birthday in 1900, the young educator penned Lift Every Voice, which 500 middle schoolers sang in tribute to Booker T. Washington. Johnson's prose was set to music by his younger brother, J. Rosamond Johnson, a New England Conservatory-trained composer. Lift Every Voice and Sing is a faith-oriented, inclusive, and pragmatic response to the societal ills Johnson saw around him. Faced with white supremacy, nationalism, and the proliferation of colonization, he put to words a theology sung out from the mouths of children, a calling to lift every voice and sing and march on till victory is won. Beyond an anthem, a song of faith, this is a hymn of hope and invitation. It gives us hope for an inclusive, equitable, and just society, an invitation to be a part of the making of such. And with that, we ask that if you are able to, please stand as we listen to the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Good morning. As we celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. King, let's commit our hearts and our hand to keeping the dream alive, and more importantly, for helping that dream become our reality. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the presence has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, dealt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our Father sighed. Oh, we have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out of the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our wearies, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on, lest our feet stray from the places our God where we met thee, lest our hearts drunk with the wine of the world we get thee shadowed beneath thy hand. May we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land. Thank you.
That was amazing to listen to and watch. Now we're gonna move on before we have Professor Washington come in and give his keynote address. We're gonna have a raffle, which will be fun. So we also have some food in the top corner, and there's some more food that'll be coming. So for these next 5 to 7 minutes, you guys can come down, take a raffle, and then drop the other half of it in the bag I'll have. And then also feel free to grab some food, and then we will start our keynote address after that. So we'll start that now. Okay, last call for putting in a raffle in this bag if you are interested in it. And then we'll get started. All right, if everyone could start making their way back, if they're not in line for the food. If you are in line for the food, just make sure you have your raffle in hand. a seat. If you wanted to grab food, you can do so quietly. And if you aren't grabbing food, then please go ahead and take a seat.
It's on? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name's Nia Scott, and I'm a first-year student here in the PA program. I have the honor this evening to introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Linn Washington, Jr. Linn Washington, Jr. is a professor of journalism here at Temple University. Washington continues to work as a professional journalist where he specializes in investigative news, coverage, and analytical commentary. Washington's reporting and research examines issues involving race-based inequalities impacting both the criminal justice system and the news media. Further, his reporting/research explores various issues related to social justice, race, racism, and international affairs. Washington's reporting career has involved news coverage/reportage across America and on 4 of the world's 7 continents. During his news industry career, Washington has held positions from general assignment reporter to executive editor. Additionally, his professional career has included service as special assistant to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. Washington regularly teaches skills courses in reporting, writing, and communications law. He co-founded Temple's Philadelphia Neighborhoods.com. That hyperlocal news site, staffed by Temple journalism students, earned over 50 regional and national awards during Washington's directorship. 7 of those awards recognized Philadelphia Neighborhoods.com as America's best college news website. Washington has led multiple study abroad programs for Temple students in London, UK, and South Africa. Works produced by students in the South Africa International Reporting Training programs Washington has directed have won regional, national, and international awards. Washington is a graduate of the Yale Law Journalism Fellowship Program. He earned a master in the study of law from the Yale Law School, and Washington holds a Bachelor's of Science in Communications from Temple University. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Linn Washington, Jr. You're welcome.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the administration here at the medical school for this gracious invitation. I'd like to thank the organizing committee for all of your work to get this together. And I would like to thank you for being here. Temple used to have a recruiting slogan that said, you could have gone anywhere, but you came to Temple. Well, the reality is I know you guys could have been anywhere, but you came here, so I really appreciate that. I have a few little remarks. And I know you're saying, uh-oh, here comes this professor, 3 hours talking. Yeah, I could talk for 3 hours and a little bit more. But I'm doing this remarks printed out for basically 2 things. As a journalist, my job is to be accurate and factual. So I want to be able to do that. And then there's another thing, so I'll just put that in parentheses. As an aging guy, I just forget stuff. So I don't want to forget stuff. So we'll get started. As you all know, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is one of the most well-known and transformative persons in the last 100 years. So much still remains little known about Dr. King. Take Dr. King's legendary 1963 speech, for example. That speech is well known for King's dream. Incredibly, little is known about the speech in terms of one fact. Before King articulated his dream, he detailed the nightmares that Black Americans live. Nightmares of police brutality. Yes, he criticized police brutality twice in that speech. Nightmares of discrimination in public accommodations like hotels. and the nightmare of being robbed of the fundamental right to vote, a right essential for democracy. King articulated his dream. It wasn't just about his little children. King stated his dream included seeing changes in the state of Mississippi. He said the state of Mississippi was sweltering in the heat of injustice, and he hoped that transformation would make it an oasis of freedom and justice. One of those injustices that he was referencing about Mississippi was that that state had a high racial disparity in infant and maternal mortality. Mississippi today remains at the top of the list of states with the highest levels of infant and maternal mortality. One of those little known aspects of King's life is his fierce advocacy for equity in healthcare. King saw healthcare as a human right. In 1966, Dr. King stated, of all forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and inhumane. Of all forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane. Dr. King is known as a passionate advocate for civil rights and voting rights. Little was known about his advocacy for improved healthcare in urban and rural areas. Too little was known about King's advocacy for the end of discrimination in the treatment at hospitals and an end to denials of admission of non-whites to medical schools, dental schools, and nursing schools. A lot is known about King's advocacy for better treatment of the poor of all races. The poor in the slums of Harlem, New York City, before gentrification, and the poor in the hollows of West Virginia. Yet too little is known about King knowing the irrefutable connection between poverty and poor health. The connection between poverty and poor health is known, yet is persistently ignored. In 1941, a physician in North Philadelphia criticized that connection between poverty and poor health. That physician, Dr. Wilbur Strickland, said there is an irrefutable evidence that substandard dwellings in which Negroes are forced to live in Philadelphia are exacting a tremendous social toll of mortality and morbidity. The consequences of poor health from poverty all day, every day at that fine Temple Hospital located right across the street. Also in 1941, another African-American doctor who was then the head of the North Philadelphia Civic League urged city officials to improve housing conditions, saying such improvement, quote, would cost less than caring for sick people. In talking about Dr. King and healthcare, I would be remiss in not noting a few little known facts about Philadelphia. The man widely recognized as the first Black physician in the United States was born in Philadelphia. We're talking about back in the late 1700s. James Durham received his early medical training in Philadelphia before moving to New Orleans, where he made his mark in the early 1800s. One of the preeminent physicians of that time, a guy named Benjamin Rush, who treated people like Benjamin Franklin, praised Durham. But as that dynamic of denial and racism in the United States would have it, New Orleans passed a law that said no one without a license could practice medicine, and Durham couldn't get a license, so he had to stop practicing medicine. The first African-American female to own and operate a drugstore anywhere in America was Julia Pearl Hughes. Miss Hughes opened her drugstore in South Philadelphia in 1899. Miss Hughes was a graduate of the Howard Medical School, or Pharmacy School, excuse me. And before she opened her drugstore, she ran the pharmacy at a hospital called Frederick Douglass Hospital. That was one of the first black hospitals in the United States, founded by the first black graduate of the University of Pennsylvania's medical school. The second drugstore opened by a black woman in Philadelphia was also located in South Philadelphia. That drugstore was opened by a woman named Sister Dillard Dean in June of 1912. Dean had a Temple connection. Dean graduated from Temple's pharmacy school in 1911. Go Owls, right? In 1966, when Dr. King called out the shocking injustice of inequitable health care, he was in Chicago speaking at a conference of an organization, the Medical Committee for Human Rights. King supported the works of that committee that included ending segregation in the nation's hospitals. In 1946, the federal government approved a law that provided funding to build hospitals, primarily in rural areas, and principally in the South that had less hospitals than most places. But embedded in that law was an agreement to continue segregation. That law said it was okay to have separate but equal segregation, which, well, I won't describe it the way I would like to describe it, but it was wrong. But it was the wrong that was put in the law. And one of the things that you will notice in even a cursory examination of American history is that racism has been embedded in U.S. society and the law from the very inception of this country. Just another little factoid that you'll never see on a test. The first petition sent to Congress asking for a gradual abolition of slavery was sent by black Philadelphians. You know, Philadelphia at one time was the nation's capital. If you go down to 6th and Market Street right now today, you will see a depiction of the house that George Washington used to live in. And when George Washington lived there, he held slaves. So you say, well, what's the big deal about that? Because everybody held slaves back, not everybody, but it was legal back then. And it was. But George Washington broke the law. Pennsylvania had a law that said if a slave of a non-resident, and Washington was a resident of Virginia, slaves of non-residents, if they were brought into Pennsylvania, if they were here for 6 months, they were automatically free. So what did old George do? He told a lie. He would recycle. He would cycle his slaves back to his plantation and then bring them back and start that time clock again. There's an effort now to erase references of slavery at that site, coming from the White House. So I don't want to get partisan here, so I'll leave that one alone. In 1966, Dr. King blasted the American Medical Association for its conspiracy of inaction, its refusal to address segregation at hospitals, and its refusal to address segregation at medical schools. In 1967, a year later, King went down to Jamaica, went up in the hills, him and his wife, and wrote a book. And in that book, he stated that systemic racism required restitution. Now, people will always wonder, well, did King ever talk about reparations? And the answer generally is no, but he said restitution. And it's the same thing as reparations. But we like to parse words. In that book, King listed inadequate health care as one of the, quote, bitter components of oppression that Blacks had to endure. And I must note, as you know better than I, inadequate health care remains a component of oppression today. In 1967, King was preparing for the Poor People's Campaign in Washington, D.C. This was a planned mass demonstration in D.C. for better treatment of the poor, addressing poverty in all races, not just Black folk, but all races. Demands of the Poor People's Campaign included improvements in health care. Demands of the Poor People's Campaign included medical-related demands, like guaranteed access to health care in rural and urban areas. Demands included improvements in medical care. Demands included improvements in Medicare and Medicaid. Demands included desegregated hospitals, desegregated hospital admissions, ending the denials of staff privileges for Black doctors at hospitals, and increasing admissions of minorities at medical schools, dental schools, and nursing schools. One would think that in America, these demands would be embraced. One would think that in America, having poor people come and saying, hey, in the richest country in the history of the world, we should be able to get a little something, something. But the then President of the United States was prepared to bring the army into DC to stop the Poor People's Campaign. Major labor leaders who said they were for civil rights were opposed to the Poor People's Campaign. So a lot of the currents that we see flowing through our society today, many of the currents that we say are so crazy, have historical backing. So some people who we say are the problem are only the latest example of the problem. The transformative advocacy of Dr. King, his inspiration, had impacts worldwide. Yet little is known about the fact that King's protest advocacy began in the Philadelphia area. I'll get to that in a minute, because that's a real interesting story. And also, Dr. King's method of advocacy was formed after he attended a lecture at a church in Center City, Philadelphia. King's legacy of advocacy secured worldwide recognitions, including a park named for him in Paris, France, a forest named for him in Israel, a garden named for him in New Delhi, India, and his placement over the famous west entrance to Westminster Abbey in London. Over that door, there's sculptures of what they say the 10 religious martyrs of the 20th century. And the one who is right in the middle of the arch over that door is Dr. Martin Luther King. If you're in London, oh, it's great because most of the museums and stuff are free, but this one, you could just get off the district line underground and see it. It's right across from Parliament Square, where one of the statues in Parliament Square is a guy named Mahatma Gandhi. Put a pin in that, I'll get back to that in a minute. Next to Mahatma Gandhi is Nelson Mandela, and it's across the street from Parliament. Oh, and another recognition for Dr. King. There is an institute in South Africa called the King Luthuli Institute. So who is Luthuli, or who was Luthuli? He was a Nobel Prize winner for his anti-apartheid activities, Chief Albert Luthuli. And in 1962, he and Dr. King issued a joint statement calling for a boycott on South Africa because of its apartheid. So years before King made news calling for an end of the war in Vietnam, in large part, not only because war is wrong, but in large part because it was taking money that could have been used to help the poor, he was looking at apartheid in South Africa. There are nearly 1,000 streets across America named for Dr. Martin Luther King. The scenic West River Drive through Fairmount Park along the Schuylkill River in Philadelphia now is named Martin Luther King Drive. In Camden, across the Delaware River, there is a MLK Boulevard. That boulevard ends in the Wiggins Waterfront Park. And the Wiggins, who that park honors, played an important role in a pivotal event in King's life. We think of King getting into activism in Montgomery, Alabama, with the bus boycott. And this was what gave him national stature. And from that national stature, he started getting an international stature. But King's first protest was not in Montgomery. King's first protest was at a place in New Jersey, about 10 miles from where we are today. A restaurant that no longer exists in Maple Shade, New Jersey. In the Philadelphia area because he was doing his seminary school at a seminary in Chester, Pennsylvania. And while there, one of his buddies from Morehouse was also in the seminary school. That guy, Walter McCall, his relatives lived in Camden. So King and McCall would hang out in Camden a lot. And Dr. King, as so many young Negroes of their time, said, we got to do something to try to end this discrimination. And so he conscientiously said that we're going to go up to Maple Shade, New Jersey, and take some action there. This was in June of 1950. And it was him, McCall's girlfriend, and the roommate of McCall's girlfriend, a woman named Doris Wilson. They went into Mary's Tavern, asked for a couple of beers on a Sunday night, and the bar owner said, "No, I ain't giving it to you." The bar owner said he thought those Negroes were trying to set him up because they were so well dressed and they were so proper and they were so articulate. Whoa, okay. So then they asked for ginger ale. And the guy said no. He goes into his bedroom or his office, comes out with a gun, threatens him with a gun, goes to the door, shoots the gun. And of course, at that point, King and his crew left. And they immediately went to the police station in Maple Shade that night. Who came that night to help them at the police station was the head of the Camden County NAACP, a guy named Dr. Ulysses Wiggins. Yeah, the guy who the park is named after. That incident led to King filing his first lawsuit against discrimination. That lawsuit was filed by a guy named Burke Johnson. Burke Johnson was a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania's law school. He was the law review editor at the law school at that time. And one of the things that Burke Johnson did while he was there was a brilliant young black woman who was in the law school, probably the first one in the law school at Penn. And she wanted to be on the law review, and the dean of the law school at the time wasn't having it. And Johnson and other people said, no, she's coming on. And this was a woman named Sadie Alexander. So there's a lot of history here. The law that they used had initially been passed in 1945. It became the first statewide prohibition of discrimination in public accommodations. And that law was introduced by the second Black person to ever serve in New Jersey's legislature. Think about that. It wasn't until the mid-1940s when the second Black person served in the legislature of New Jersey. Of course, racism doesn't exist in America, so I'm sorry if I'm bringing these things up. Interestingly, in New Jersey, Black people lost the right to vote, I think in 1808. And the party that pushed for withdrawal of voting rights for free Negroes and for women of all races, that party was called the Democrat-Republican Party. So when you say that racism is bipartisan, the Democrat-Republican Party split up, and yes, the Republicans of the day trace back to that, as well as the Democratic Party traces back to that also. That demonstration didn't work out too well for Dr. King. The lawsuit didn't go anywhere because there were some witnesses that he wanted to have testify for him didn't come in. There were 3 students from the University of Pennsylvania that went to Mary's Tavern and were served on a Sunday night. And they were supposed to come in and testify, and they got cold feet. They said that if they testified, they would ruin their law careers. So King wasn't able to proceed forward with his lawsuit. Now, if you read any of the scores of biographies on King, King's time in Philadelphia and all of these incredible transformative events in his life take up only a few paragraphs. Pulitzer Prize winning biographies that are like 900 pages, few paragraphs on these big changes that happened to King here in the Philadelphia area. And these authors say, well, it's no big deal. I mean, he just had a little encounter at Mary's Tavern, and it really wasn't important to him. And I'm sure I'm gonna get in trouble with this, but since they're in Atlanta, they'll have to run all the way up here to catch me. I'm a little older, but I can still run. But anyway, the King's family plays into this. Because what happened that night, he goes into a bar and orders some beer. Well, excuse me, he was a 20-year-old guy. The ladies loved him, and he loved the ladies. But they want to keep this image of him like, almost like walking on water. So they, go along with the suppression of King being there. But that incident led King to really start thinking about how I can find a method to confront this racism that I see all around me. So in November of 1950, there was a lecture being delivered in Philadelphia at the First Unitarian Church in Philadelphia, 21st and Chestnut Street. The person delivering that lecture was a guy named Mordecai Johnson. He was the president of Howard University. And the topic that night, Mahatma Gandhi and his method for social change. A little known aspect of African American history is connections between some African American leaders here and Gandhi they looked at Gandhi, they said, Gandhi beat the British Empire. There must be something going on there. Maybe we can get a little something, get some ideas out of this. Some of King's mentors at Morehouse had gone to India. A couple of years ago, I literally stumbled upon this. There was a series of exchanges, letters, correspondences between Gandhi and a guy named George Washington Carver. Yeah, the great scientist and agricultural genius at Tuskegee. So Mordecai Johnson was, from all historic accounts, a very powerful speaker. And King wrote in his first autobiography, Strive for Freedom, I think it was 1958, that after hearing Dr. Johnson speak on Gandhi, he was so electrified, King was so electrified, that he went out and bought 6 books. Well, that's what he wrote, but not only did he buy 6 books, not that night, he left that lecture, went back to a house in North Philadelphia where Johnson was staying, and they talked all night long. So King's adoption of Gandhi's principles came right here in Philadelphia. Not even across the river, but right here in Philadelphia. If you go down, well, you won't see that, but you'll see something else there. That church is now on the Pennsylvania Historic Registry, or Pennsylvania Registry of Historic Sites, for the Gandhi lecture that turned King around. And that church is now also on the National Registry of Historic Sites. I co-authored the application to the state that was adopted and expanded and sent down to Washington, D.C., and it was adopted like 2 years ago. Also, and this is what you can see, there's a blue plaque right on the front. I mean, they have it's locked off, but you can go there and look in. From the Nubian Trust Community Organization. This is an organization in the UK that goes all around the UK and puts up historic markers representing things that blacks did. Primarily black Britons, but some of them are American. Dr. King, Malcolm X, Sidney Bechet, the considered one of the founders of jazz music. The very first plaque in America that the Nubian Trust did was at that church. Now, it's interesting that the state of Pennsylvania would accept the documentation of the transformative event that happened with Dr. King at the First Unitarian Church. And I say that to draw a distinction between what hasn't happened in New Jersey. A guy named Patrick Duff, a proud high school dropout, one of the most brilliant guys I know, he finds out about King. Surprised that Dr. King did that protest at Maple Shade. He said, I grew up in Delran, which was one city over, didn't know anything about this. And how he stumbled upon King and Maple Shade was that a number of years ago, you probably heard that there was an Ebola problem in Africa, primarily in West Africa and Liberia. And some students from Africa, from Rwanda, and their parents came to Maple Shade. And the nurse at the school in Maple Shade said, "You're from Africa, you have Ebola, you can't come into the school." And they said, wait a minute, between Liberia and Rwanda, there's a couple thousand miles. Yes, pathogens travel in the air, but they won't go that far. So he starts researching, Mr. Duff did, And he found out that the very night when King went to Maple Shade, he had a discussion at a place in Camden, the house that he stayed in with Walter McCall, the house that Walter McCall's relatives lived in, 753 Walnut Street. And Duff, since 2015, has been trying to get the state of New Jersey to designate 753 Walnut Street as a historical site. Now here's where bigotry has a very bipartisan phase. When Duff first started working on getting that historic recognition, a Republican was the governor of New Jersey. After he first started, Duff was able to have a big event at that house. The keynote speaker at that event was a guy named John Lewis, the congressman, formerly right-hand man of Dr. King. Everybody was, yeah, we're gonna get this house done. And then they didn't do anything. There's an organization in New Jersey called the Historic Preservation, HPO, Historic Preservation Office. They're the ones that give the designation. They have fought strenuously to block this, even to the point of paying $20,000 to Stockton University to do a study to challenge Patrick Duff's information. This study was the first time in the history of New Jersey that a study was ordered for a historical site. They had designated 50,000 sites in New Jersey, but they wouldn't give it to 753 Walnut. And to this day, they haven't. King goes from 753 to Mary's Tavern, files the lawsuit there, eventually comes over to Philadelphia, gets turned on to Gandhiism. And another interesting thing about New Jersey, you know, we have the law being passed by a black guy. We have King using that law. And then it just goes on and on and on in New Jersey. The bigotry there is just outrageous. So, before I bore all of you, I will conclude with an observation that King shared during an impromptu address in Philadelphia on October 26, 1967. King came in and out of Philadelphia a lot. He had friends here. He got a lot of support here, a lot of funding and things like that. He came here. So when he was here in October 67, earlier in the day, he spoke at St. Joe's College. He was talking about the Vietnam War. Almost 9,000 people were there. And he made an unannounced stop at a high school in South Philadelphia. And in speaking to students, and this is why I thought it would be appropriate because you were all students, albeit not junior high school students, but he was speaking to junior high school students, but he laid out what he called the blueprint for success. And King said elements of that success included a determination to achieve excellence in whatever you do. And I would urge all of you to have that fierce determination to achieve excellence in what you're doing here and what you do after you leave from here. I'm a firm believer that you can succeed in whatever you want to do as long as your goals are realistic, if you're willing to work hard. And in laying out this blueprint for success, King also said that not only have a commitment to excellence, but also have a commitment to what he said was the eternal principles of beauty, love, and justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Washington. So we're going to open up the floor for questions. We will have runners, mic runners going up and down. If anyone has any questions or comments, we're not letting you off the hook yet. So yeah, please feel free to ask. I think we have someone.
I know somebody has some questions. You're acting like journalism students. I have to beat my students over the head to ask questions, and these are people supposed to be asking questions.
I wanted to know how old was King when he was having these life transformative experiences? And thank you for the talk, very beneficial.
Sure. King was in his 20s. He had just graduated from Morehouse. He came to the Crozier Seminary in Chester, and he was there from 1948 to 1951. And then he went to the Boston University, got his doctorate, and then he went back down south and ended up in Alabama. And as they say, the rest is history. So the short answer to your good question is he was in his 20s when this happened.
That was an incredible talk. I'm a graduate of Morehouse College as well as Martin Luther King, so I feel like I've been steeped in much of the history, but the things that you shared today was eye-opening for a number of reasons. Recently, the administration released documents that the CIA had kept about Martin Luther King. I don't know whether you had an opportunity to review any of that, or were there any kind of surprises or information that you thought was worthy of sharing?
The short answer is no, I haven't reviewed those documents. It would not surprise me that, there was some dirt in there. Because of the impact that King was having on the totality of society, there were elements in the government that were trying to do anything they could to undermine him. And yes, King was an incredible person. He did a whole lot, but he was also a human with frailties. So they're trying to highlight some of these frailties to try to undercut the foundations of the change that he was trying to make. The CIA, though, let's just say it has a checkered past. I mentioned the name Nelson Mandela. And Nelson Mandela was ultimately captured and ended up spending 28 years in jail because the CIA had an informant that told the CIA where Nelson Mandela would be. Because Nelson Mandela had evaded South Africa's authorities for about a year. They were trying to track him down. And it was the CIA that dimed him out. The Mandela House Museum in Soweto, there is a letter on the wall, part of the exhibit, where some members of Congress had asked then President George H.W. Bush, the dad, not the son, to apologize because H.W. Bush at one point was the head of the CIA. And then President Bush waved goodbye to that request with his middle finger. So the short answer is I don't know. I've done a lot of examinations of the FBI records, and it is rumored that there's probably some more documents that are going to come out. And it's amazing how this current administration can find documents on Dr. King, but they can't find the Epstein files. First is that we don't have any, then we got some stuff, and now there's 1 million, now there's 2 million. Before it's all over, to be 25 million. I mean, I'm being facetious, but yeah, our government hasn't done all that it should.
Hi, Dr. Washington, thank you so much for your talk. I had a question about what the role, I guess all of these stories that you've told us and this history, How did you find this out? Was there a role of archival material? Where did this archival material come from? We had Dr. Diane Turner come here back in April, and she showed a lot of really wonderful stuff about the Frederick Douglass Hospital. So I'd just love to hear a little bit more about where this history kind of sourced.
It's been let's just say a long journey. I've been really looking at this since the early 1980s. And specific to your question, I've utilized the Bloxham collection. Mr. Bloxham was like a mentor to me. Books, I mean, I've been in libraries all over the country. Through archives, when I was at the Yale Law School, I popped up to Boston for a couple of days to look at the archives at the Boston University, and then also talking to people. Say in Camden, there are persons who are still alive who were living in that house, part of the Hunt family. So a collection of archive material and primary sources. When I was doing some work on this the incident in Maple Shade, I ended up talking to the lawyer who represented the bar owner, and that lawyer ultimately became a judge in Burlington County. And in talking with that guy, he said, "Oh, before you go, let me give you some papers." So he gave me the original arrest reports and stuff. And I'm like, whoa, okay, thank you. So yeah, it's just digging around and just trying to find as much information as you can. I always say that journalism is not heavy lifting, but it is hard work. So you have to just dig and dig and dig. And then I also think that there's an inertia with reporting, and once you get moving, things start coming to you. And so for any and all of that, that's how I got it. And how I actually got on this case, there was a brilliant historian in Philadelphia, a guy named James Spady. Didn't have any degrees, didn't have the pedigree of a PhD. And thank you for the promotion, I don't either. I'm just Linn Washington, I'm not Dr. Linn Washington. Unfortunately, I'm Linn Washington Jr. So somebody else gave me that name. But I ran into Spady on a corner in Center City back, I guess it was 1983. And every time you saw Spady, he just fill your head with all kinds of historical stuff. So he was talking about W.E.B. Du Bois and how Du Bois ended up writing the Philadelphia Negro book, right? And where he was staying in South Philly and all of that. And then he said, "Oh, and by the way, King's first protest was in Maple Shade." I was like, "What? Yeah, get out of here." He said, "Oh, yeah, it's true. I'll see you later." And that just sparked the imagination. And I was working with the Daily News, and in the media business, every time there's the Martin Luther King holiday, you gotta come up with a special, right? So I said, well, why don't we look at King in his first protest? And looked around the room and I said, okay, then you look at it. So I've just been, digging at this literally since 1983. Yeah.
I think we have another question down here.
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
Thank you so much. Oh God, sorry. Thank you so much for your talk. I was wondering, as things have changed in the world, if Dr. King were around today, what conflicts, both domestic and globally, do you think he would have a hand in?
What would King do? The truthful answer to your very pointed question is that we don't know. I would speculate that he would, at this point, be still concerned about the inequities, particularly the income inequity, and addressing the issue of the poor. He saw the very destructive nature of poverty. In fact, one of the things that I came upon when I was going through the archives at Boston University was a paper that King wrote about his development when he was at the university, about his early life. And he said that he became really interested in helping end poverty when he saw people in soup kitchens and bread lines during the 1930s and the Depression. So I would say he would be very keyed in on still fighting poverty. We know King pretty much for civil rights, but in the latter years of his very short yet impactful life, he looked at silver rights, economics. And I would venture to say, speculation, that he would be opposed to like all wars. You don't really recover from war, and he would know that. So I would say, you know, he would look at poverty, and he would look at other inequities in our society. And he would still probably be hated by certain sectors of our society. Because we look at, you know, a lot of deprivations today, and we try to think, there's a tendency to think that it's just happening the here and now, but there's been a whole history of that. And that's why there's a lot of the effort to, you know, erase and minimize and delegitimize history. It's almost Orwellian. What did Orwell say in 1984? I'm going to mess this up, but you know, they changed history, and then everything became the present, and the present was controlled by the party. So, yeah.
We have another question over here.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming to talk to us with the, so, Mr. Washington, you talk about Dr. King's dream, and I believe history is something that's shared, so those dreams carry on with us and inspire us to go on and do great things. So, my question to you is, what is your dream, and what change do you hope to impart on this world?
Oh, wow, that's good. For change that I've tried has been done, because these gray hairs are real. I don't get up in the morning and dye my hair gray to look distinguished. I'm an old guy, man, you know. I honestly thought when I was a lot younger that things would change and things would be a lot better for my children. And they have changed. I don't want to say that, you know, nothing's changed. There's been tremendous change. But some of the fundamental things haven't. Right now, if I'm fighting for anything, and I still am fighting for, I'm trying to fight for a better world for my grandchildren. My oldest daughter turned 50 last year, you know, so now the focus is on the grandkids. But things have magnified then, okay? So it's not just fighting structural inequities in our society. I mean, we're looking at existential stuff. You know, my wife and I always talk about, you know, what things are going to look like for our grandkids, you know, with these ecological calamities and, you know, all of these, you know, wars and dissensions. And so I just try to do what I can do. I've come to realize that, no, I'm not going to part the waters, and I'm not going to make major changes. But if I can impact one person and hope that that one person impacts somebody else, I think I've had a good day. So just try to do a little bit. It's like I told my oldest grandson, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. So take that step. Hope that was responsive. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Washington. I appreciate the talk. I have a question. Could you maybe speak on Dr. King's relationship with his faith and how his strength of faith influenced his civil rights actions?
Well, very clearly, his faith drove his commitment to social change. It was rooted in Christianity. And one of the things I think gets not enough attention yes, Dr. King was an activist, but Dr. King was also a scholar. When you read his autobiographies, I mean, he's studying the legendary religious figures in history. He's studying great philosophers. When he talks about the impact of what here in that lecture did, he was saying how he was studying all these different philosophies, including Marxism, and came to the conclusion that none of them would, had the resiliency that Christianity did. So his faith was very important to him. And, remember his father was a minister, and one of his grandfathers, his mother's father, was a minister. So ministering, I don't know if that's a word or not, but being a minister and being imbued with faith was really a part of his life, all of his life. Yeah.
Yes. My question is, looking at the state of our political climate right now, what do you think if Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., if he was alive right now, what would he say?
What do I think he would say?
Yes.
No! No, I think he would be, somewhat disappointed, and I'm just saying that almost with tongue in cheek. When we look at persons who have really fought and struggled for social change, they've had tremendous successes, but there's still shortcomings, and we all see those. Mm-hmm. And they were pushing, but right now I think, if things at best are at a standstill and circling, and at worst they're going backwards. So there would be, some profound disappointment. Dr. King, near the latter months of his life, he started looking around and he was saying, maybe we didn't do all that we should have done. And I think there's something to the effect of, about integration, he was saying, I'm not sure that we should be integrating into a burning house. And if the house was burning in '68, it's an inferno today. Yeah. But the short answer to your question, I think he would be a little disappointed.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time today, sir. I really appreciate it and your insights. So it's funny, I was actually going to ask you a question mentioning that exact quote. Mm-hmm. And I was just curious, and I hate to give you another hypothetical, but if he was not murdered the way he was in '68, do you think his stance would have changed on integration in general? And he would have leaned more towards the philosophies of a Malcolm X in terms of just focusing on group economics instead?
Very good question. I would tend to say yes, because when he left the South and came north and brought his movement north, he was profoundly disorientated by the degree of anger and just racism that he confronted. So in the latter months of his life, things were starting to change in him. A lot of the things that were published after his death were things written, months before he died, but in those months, he really started, changing. So I think we would see a different king, a qualitatively different king.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
There's one right here.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I just had a question. We know Dr. King made a lot of successes with the civil rights movement, and in a way, things are going back today. And I was wondering if you could talk about what you feel like he's done during like his life that made his work so successful, and how can we apply it today as we continue to fight injustices?
While he did a lot of work, his goals that he was trying to, some of the fundamental goals that he was trying to accomplish was for justice and for all Americans to have all of the rights and privileges that are promised in the Constitution. When you look at his I Have a Dream speech, he begins by saying that, America's signed a promissory note, and you're saying that there's no money in the bank to pay off that note. So in terms of us and what we should do, we should continue to struggle to make America what it says it's supposed to be. America has always been an aspirational goal, trying to reach what was in the words of the Declaration of Independence and then subsequently rolled into the Constitution. So if we fight to make America a better place, a place where all Americans can enjoy the benefits, and I'm not saying in a socialistic sort of way. I mean, some people who are a little smarter and work a little harder are going to do a little bit better than other people. But at the very least, one of the things that he was fighting for was like a guaranteed minimum income. We should be able to do that. We can. As I said today, there was a lot of emphasis on him about getting good health care. We could have good health care. Other industrialized nations, rich nations, do have health care for all of their people, and we could have that here. So again, if we just fight to make America what it is supposed to be, joining that fight that not only he had, but so many other people had too. Let's remember the March on Washington, where King made that brilliant speech. King was one of the last people that they invited to come to speak, but that March on Washington, it was a march for jobs and justice. And that march was originally planned for 1943. And the person who organized the 43 effort was also the person that organized the 63 effort, a labor leader named A. Philip Randolph. And 1943 was when there was a war. And the president asked Randolph to hold off, I'm going to make some changes. So one of the changes that they did was to open up defense industries so Negroes could have jobs. And after, 20 years, Randolph and his people say, wait a minute, we don't have any changes, so we're going to go back to Washington. So again, the short answer that I would offer to you is that we all try to fight to make America what it is for all of us. Because maybe it was King or somebody else. If we don't all stand together, we're going to fall together, so. Internalize that. Hopefully we will, one of these days. Maybe when my grandkids are as old as I am. Good.
I have a question.
Yes.
My question comes from the perspective of a room full of students who will be the future medical providers. As you've examined Martin Luther King's impact and philosophy and his role in history, what is something that you could take away that you would hope for us to implement or be reminded of as we move into our future practice?
I would just, I guess, fall back on what I said based on what he said in 1967. Work as hard as you can to achieve excellence, in whatever field that you want to do. What you are preparing to do is so vital for our society. You're literally dealing with the health of society because society is made up of individuals. And one of the things, I guess, and this is like way out of my lane, I'm not a medical guy. I still flinch when I get stuck with a needle, and I've probably been stuck with a needle more times from age 70 to 75 than from age 1 to 69. But I think there should be more of an emphasis on preventive health than after you get sick. You know, so and that's just not confined to medicine. I mean, you know, because part of the problems that we have is that we have all this bad food, you know, poor water. So without me getting too far afield and really out of my lane, I would just say, as you as students work to be the best that you can at your discipline, because it will help people in so many ways. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. I had a two-parted question, and it might be long, might be convoluted, but I'll try to keep it short. You know, one of the things that I think when I think of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is nonviolent direct action, and I have a background in climate politics. A lot of what we did was planning protests, and you know, the first climate protest I went to was in 2014, New York City. We had 350,000 people show up. And I think since then, what I've seen is increased protests, increased number of people putting their bodies on the lines, and I see videos of ICE agents ripping families apart. And for me, I have a hard time reconciling the idea of nonviolent direct action. Maybe that's not, I'm sure that's not all he taught, but when I think of Gandhi and when I think of Dr. MLK, those are principles that are highlighted. But in the world that we are living in right now, it seems very difficult to practice and believe in the principle of nonviolent direct action when there's violence inflicted upon innocent people every day. And so I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts around that.
Yes. I came of age in the 60s. So the 60s was very turbulent, very militant. And truth be told, in the 60s, I was somewhat disparaging of Dr. King because I just really couldn't get that turn the other cheek business, you know, that nonviolent, violent stuff. You know, the Black Panthers, you know, Malcolm, those. But the more I studied King, respect that I got for him, because it takes a whole lot to get beat up and still say you love the person who beat you. Protest is in the First Amendment. There's 5 clauses in the First Amendment, you know, one, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, but there's the right to present grievances to government, that's protest. So we really need to have that. No, I don't think any one thing is going to be that magic key that'll change, so we have to do as much as we can. But at the same token, you just have to embrace what you think is right for you. And if you want to take it a little bit further, fine. You know, I'm looking at like what's going on in Minneapolis and other cities, you know, where we have these people who, you know, are masked up and are really kitted out more than some of the soldiers that we have. Do you get violent with them? Even if you have a weapon, it may not go too well. So we have to adapt to the times, but there are still ways to effectuate change without getting violent. Those 50,000 people that you talked about, if each one of those 50,000 people actually went out and voted, we would have some change. You know, the current president says that he won by a landslide. He won by less than 2% of the vote. And here in Philadelphia, when you looked at the 2024 voting, the number of registered voters who didn't come out to vote could have changed the results in Pennsylvania. Not so far from where we are right now is what's called the seventh ward. It's predominantly Latino. Voting percentages in that ward, I mean, people who actually come out to vote, is substantially less than the people who are registered to vote. They average between 4 and 7%. So we need to come out and really get involved, because we could, really make some change. So we have to use, as they say, all the arrows in the quiver. And it might take, pushing the envelope a little bit, maybe seeming to be a little violent, but ultimately violence is, shall we say, problematic. You don't want to be that one that doesn't come home that day. But again, that's a personal choice, and I respect the choices that people make. But that's a choice you have to make for yourself.
Is it okay if I ask my second question?
Yes.
Do we have time? My second question is more related to your background in journalism and whether or not you have any remarks on just online disinformation and misinformation, where I feel like the narrative around science and truth has become increasingly more distorted. And, in my past work, climate change is, for the most part, believed by most parts of the world, and yet in the United States, over 50% of people do not believe in climate change. And we had a study done where I think it's like 73% of Americans can't tell whether or not what they're reading is true or not. Mm-hmm. And yeah, just, I think that plays directly into electoral politics and seeing what people are able to be literate about and policies that might help them, but other people are saying they're not going to help them. So wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, one of the things that I think gets looked over too much is the responsibility of citizens in the United States. Being a citizen is not like going to great adventure and we just get on the ride and ride. We have to be actively engaged. We have a First Amendment, not only freedom of speech, but freedom of the press, because the founders of the country, the guys who put in it was all guys, that's a whole nother conversation, but in the meeting down in what is now Center City, they wanted to have these freedoms because they felt that democracy works when you have an informed electorate. If people know what's going on around them, then they would make better decisions at the ballot box. And knowing what's going on around you is something that you have to do. So I'm really disappointed that so few people in our country read. And that's separate from those who cannot read, which is like astounding. I mean, the levels of illiteracy. But those who are literate are not reading. And we're so compartmentalized now, and like you said, and that leads to, is it true or is it not? So we as citizens have a responsibility, and we need to embrace that responsibility to know what's going on. Not only read what's published in America about America, but read what's published outside of America about America. Well, I don't speak French. Well, I don't speak Spanish. Well, each one of those countries have news agencies that produce content in English. But, for some reason, we're dropping that responsibility. A couple of years ago, when Russia first invaded the Ukraine, right, it's big news. Russia invading, bombing Kyiv. Blah, 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 blah. So I found a map that was written in Russian. And I showed it to my journalism students. I said, okay, could you identify where Crimea is? Where's Ukraine? They didn't know basic geography. You didn't need to read Russian to know what's on the map, but they just didn't have that literacy. And that's not a fault. That's a fault, for me, that's a fault of the people, not doing what you need to do. Many times when you're out of the country, and, which I haven't been in a couple of years, but you know, one of the things that always amazed me when I was in London, downtown in Philadelphia, the newsstands do what? They mainly sell cigarettes and lottery tickets. But overseas, you have all kinds of publications. People are reading. People are trying to understand. They're trying to be literate. I mean, even in some of the poorest, and I mean dirt poor, break your heart poor places, shanty towns in South Africa, the people are more literate and know what's going on in their country, in the rest of the world, than people here. I mean, these are people who don't have TV in their shacks because they don't have electricity in their shacks. And when I say they live in shacks, I mean, there's some of the places surrounding Johannesburg, the houses are made literally of tin and throwaway stuff. No indoor toilets. There's porta potties for 300 and 400 people. They get water from a spigot and they have to carry the water back to their places. But they're engaged, and Americans are not. And we have so much. You go to a supermarket overseas, it's like a corner store here. I mean, people would come here and they wouldn't know how to act. 15 different kinds of mustard. It's just crazy, but citizens have a responsibility, and we need to do more, and we need to do a lot better. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, we will now move on to closing remarks. If anybody has any other questions, if Professor Washington has any time, maybe you could stand back for a second. But now we'll move on to our closing remarks. I would like to introduce Dr. Sanderson, who is the Associate Professor in the Office of Strategic Partnership in Healthcare Education and Resources, to the podium to provide closing remarks.
All right, everybody, let's give a rousing round of applause for Professor Washington. So that was an incredibly rich talk and discussion. I think that we all learned a lot, and we really, really appreciate you coming to the School of Medicine to share. We're in this age, in the age of AI, it's easy to think that what happened with Martin Luther King was eons ago. It was not. So we came here today to celebrate the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King. Today, he would have been 97 years old. So less than 100 years ago, he was born. We also could mourn the death of a woman named Claudette Colvin. Does anybody know who Claudette Colvin was? Claudette Colvin died at age 86. Have you all heard of Rosa Parks? Okay, well, Claudette Colvin was before Rosa Parks. She was a few months before Rosa. She was a 15-year-old on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, and they asked her to move to the back of the bus, and she refused, and she was arrested. She just died 2 days ago. So this is not ancient history. This is something that is an ongoing fight, an ongoing struggle. Now, I appreciated all the names that you called out. There was one name you didn't call out, and that was Benjamin Elijah Mays. Benjamin Elijah Mays was the president of Morehouse College at the time when Martin Luther King went there. Benjamin Elijah Mays was thought of as the intellectual founding father of civil rights. And so just like you're in school now, Martin Luther King didn't just pop out of the womb as a civil rights leader. He needed mentorship. He needed someone to pour into him, as some of your professors, whether they be in high school or undergrad or here at your professional schools, will pour into you. But it wasn't just then. They developed a relationship. So Benjamin Elijah Mays was his mentor and actually gave the eulogy when Martin Luther King died. And so I said all that to say that all of you have innate talents, you have values and morals, and you have to put those things into use so that we can have some change effective for the people who are downtrodden in this country. And so With that, I also want to recognize and thank Dr. Melanie Cosby for putting this together, as well as our planning committee. Please give Dr. Cosby a round of applause. And I'm going to turn the mic over to her now.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, I'll be quick, for real. So I'm just want to take a few minutes to offer some acknowledgments, and I will start with you all, because like Professor Washington said, you could have chosen to be anywhere, but you are here and engaged, and certainly we hope that there was something that you heard or you learned about that you didn't know before you came in. There were so many pearls of wisdom and nuggets about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s life and legacy, his footprint in this area, and many other notable figures that have done quite a lot to sort of advance civil rights. As you all have mentioned and we've talked about today, you know, past is prologue. So these are things that we're seeing in real time now are the very things that Dr. King and those that were amongst civil rights movement advocates, activists were doing back when. And so these are things that they're not new. So we have to keep pushing, pushing, pushing. I want to thank an amazing cast of participants, and I'm going to just, you all indulge me for just a couple more minutes because I don't want to forget anyone. All right, so thanking you for being here, so we start there. Our Community Service Board members and Planning Committee have been working tirelessly for months and months and months to pull this off alongside of the Black Society of PA Students, the Student Diversity Council, members of the Student Diversity Council, members of the Urban Bioethics Interest Group, Partners in Health Student Organization, our MLK Day Planning Committee, many members on the planning committee, and so thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. The Faculty and Staff Engagement Committee, our offices, our sphere office, Strategic Planning and Healthcare Education and Resources, formerly OHEDI. If you're like, well, what is that? We're still getting accustomed to our new name and our new branding. Our Office of Medical Education and our Office of Student Support, all of our faculty, staff, and colleagues there. And none of this happens without our marketing and communications office and team, who just all of the amazing messaging that you saw on Instagram, through email, the messaging, the visual, the flyers, all of the things. Thank you very much. It just doesn't happen without you. Our events office to make sure that the logistics are just sound. We have an amazing photographer here that's bringing this all to life, and so thank you for that. And also to Dr. Goldberg's leadership and her support of these initiatives and these efforts in helping us to do what we can to manifest the vision, the mission and vision of Lewis Katz School of Medicine. We will continue to work and push, and we need you, as was mentioned, to do your part, because it certainly takes all of us to create change. And as was mentioned, little change is meaningful change, so don't ever get overwhelmed or lose sight of your impact, the impact that you can have. And so you all have been very gracious with your time, and thank you so much for attending, and we just look forward to more opportunities to engage in this way. Thank you.